Okay, so let's connect some dots. We're going to trace a straight line from military strikes happening way over in the Middle East, all the way to the price you pay at the petrol pump. It might feel like it's a world away, but believe me, this global conflict has a very, very local cost. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? How can something happening 4,000 kilometers from home hit your wallet so hard and so fast? Well, the answer is in a series of really intense events that have just gone down.
And boom, here's the immediate fallout. Just yesterday, the Indian government had to make an emergency move. They slashed the tax on petrol and diesel by a full 10 rupees. Now, this wasn't just some minor adjustment. This is a massive defensive shield trying to stop an economic shockwave from hitting all of us.
So what exactly kicked all of this off? Let's get to the heart of it. It really boils down to two huge events that happened in just the last 48 hours. And these were not random. They were very specific, targeted strikes that have put the entire global energy market on red alert.
I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. March 26th, a top Iranian commander is taken out. The very next day, Iran hits back, targeting Israel's energy infrastructure. And on that exact same day, India is forced to cut fuel taxes to absorb the blow because oil prices have just gone through the roof, and they're staying there. It's a direct cause and effect, all in less than 2 days.
All right, let's break down that first trigger. This was what military folks call a decapitation strike, taking out a key leader. And the target, Commodore Alireza Tangsiri, he wasn't just some commander. He was the guy who literally wrote the playbook for Iran's control over the world's most critical oil shipping lane, the Strait of Hormuz. Taking him off the board is a huge, huge deal.
And Iran's response? Man, it was fast, and it was smart. They hit Haifa, but look at what they hit. Oil refineries, fuel depots, naval logistics. This wasn't just a military tit for tat. This is a clear signal that the conflict is now about crippling economic and energy infrastructure. And that kind of warfare, well, that has consequences for every single one of us.
Now, to really get why these two events are so explosive, we have to talk about one very specific place on the map, the Strait of Hormuz. It is a tiny, tiny strip of water, but you can't overstate its importance. Think of it like the jugular vein of the entire global oil economy.
And this is exactly why they call it the Hormuz chokehold. A mind-boggling 25% of all the oil that travels by sea passes through this one narrow channel. And remember Commodore Tangsiri, the commander who was just killed? This was his domain. He was the architect of the strategy to control this exact choke point.
Okay, so you might be thinking, great, they got the leader, so things should be safer now, right? Well, not exactly. In fact, most analysts are saying it's the total opposite. Without Tangsiri calling the shots, all these Iranian sleeper cells along the coast could just start acting on their own. And that creates pure chaos, making the Strait of Hormuz far more unpredictable and way more dangerous for every commercial ship out there.
All right, so we've got chaos and the Strait of Hormuz. But how does that mess actually land in our wallets here in India? Well, for India, this isn't some distant problem. This is a direct hit on our economic front line. And it all starts with just how much we depend on imported energy.
I mean, this chart really tells the whole story. India imports 88% of its crude oil. Let that sink in. 88%. So when the world's main highway for oil suddenly becomes a war zone, a country like ours is incredibly vulnerable. Any little disruption over there is felt immediately right here.
And from there, the math is, well, it's painfully simple. First, the Strait of Hormuz becomes a no-go zone, so the oil supply from the Gulf just dries up. Second, with way less oil on the market, global prices shoot up. And third, guess who pays for that massive increase? You do. We do. It gets passed directly to us every time we fill up our tanks.
And just look at this spike. This is what we're talking about. Before all this, oil was around $80 a barrel. After the strikes on Haifa's energy facilities, it blew past $110. Now, that extra $30, that's not about supply and demand. That's what the market calls a war premium. It's a price hike based on nothing but risk, fear, and uncertainty.
And believe me, this isn't just about what you're paying for petrol. The damage goes way deeper. According to HDFC Bank, for every 10% jump in oil prices, our entire country's GDP growth gets cut by 0.25%. That means less growth, fewer jobs, and a slower economy for everyone. Oh, and here's another hidden cost that you're definitely paying for. The insurance for any ship brave enough to even try sailing through that region? The premiums have jumped by over 400%. And where do you think that extra cost goes?
Yep, it gets baked right into the final price of fuel.
And look, if you think the petrol situation is worrying, you need to see what's happening with cooking gas. It's actually much scarier. For crude oil, India has about 2 weeks of strategic reserves tucked away for an emergency. But for cooking gas, LPG and LNG, we have almost no safety net, no major reserve. With a huge supplier like Qatar already cutting exports, millions of Indian homes could face real shortages of a basic necessity.
So, with all this chaos, what's the government doing? Well, they're putting up a shield. A very, very expensive shield. It's basically a desperate defensive play to stop this global price shock from causing chaos and inflation back home.
Remember that 10 rupee tax cut we mentioned at the start? It comes with an absolutely massive price tag. 1.5 trillion rupees a year. That's money that was supposed to go to building roads, funding schools, and paying for other critical programs. It's a really painful trade-off, right? You either prevent an immediate price crisis or you fund long-term growth. You can't do both.
So the government is basically playing a two-handed game here to get us through this. The first is what they're calling the Russian safety valve. We're buying a ton more oil from Russia, which, completely bypasses the whole Hormuz mess. The second hand is Operation Sankalp, getting the Indian Navy ready to escort our oil tankers. But that second option is incredibly risky. One wrong move, one miscalculation with these unpredictable Iranian cells, and things could get very bad very fast.
And that brings us right back to now, to where we are today. The world, and especially India, is stuck in what you could call a high-octane waiting game. All the pieces are on the board for this to get much, much worse. And honestly, nobody knows what the next move is going to be.
So, let's just run through that chain of events one more time, because it's so important. The killing of the Iranian commander leads to unpredictable chaos in the Strait, which is a direct risk to our ships. The missile strikes on Haifa turn the war into an attack on energy, which directly spikes global oil prices. The Indian government is forced to respond with a super expensive tax cut, and the overall result is that the Strait is basically closed, which means higher insurance costs for us and potential shortages of cooking gas.
And that leaves us with one question that really matters. That 10 rupee shield is buying us some time. It's a temporary bandage on what could be a really deep wound. But with a situation this fragile, you have to ask, what happens to India's economy and to our wallets when that bandage just isn't enough anymore?